Hey everyone, thanks for coming. I'm super excited to be here and present to you some research we've done for NIST to come up with an OT security score for manufacturers. Before I get started, again, I wanted to attribute NIST funded our research under the Small Business Innovation Research Program. And big shout out to my colleague, Trevor Thomas. He was instrumentally involved in all of this and stuck through the many meetings and things, so thank you very much. And the rest of the team. So this isn't just on me. And before I really get to it, let's just step back and ask how to do better, I put this in quotes, better OT ICS cybersecurity, right? Really, it's not that difficult to do better. And bear with me on this thought experiment, right? So for example, asset buyers and owners, they have a whole laundry list of things they can do, like test devices, vulnerability analysis, SBOM, patch management, check compliance, check your contracts with all your suppliers, public assistance like CISA, etc., right? So we can probably make a list of 100 things in like an hour, and your security would be really good, right? Same on the manufacturer side, just the list differs a little bit. DevSecOps, SDLC, security testing, developer training, produce the SBOM, product compliance, etc., etc. So this slide isn't about this list or these lists specifically. It's more about the fact that we don't really have problems if we just look at the what and how, right? Now, the real question is the why. Why would you do something, right? So let's talk about incentives here for a sec. So the incentives for doing better OT ICS cybersecurity, right? There's the carrot right there. And again, these lists are up for debate. It's not that I'm particularly partial to what's on the list. It's more the overall point I'm making, right? So why would an asset owner or buyer want to do better OT ICS cybersecurity? Well, increased reliability is one of them. Protect your reputation, your company's reputation. Safety, right? Compliance, so there's the little whip icon there. If you have compliance, you get whipped to paper shuffle your compliance. I had national security on the list, because if you're like in the energy space or really many things where you don't think about it either, that it is actually indirectly or directly national security relevant, but I crossed that out because most people don't see the national security as their specific responsibility unless you're with the government dealing with it, right? Avoid litigation is a big one, right? The list is a little bit different on the manufacturer side. Now, sell more and differentiate, I crossed that out too, and I get to why that is. But if you're trying to sell a product, OT or not OT, that claims better security and expect to sell more product as a result, that is often a tough case to make, and that's at the crux of what I'm getting to in a bit. Protect reputation and compliance again, then cheaper, faster. Everyone likes cheaper, faster, better, you know. Wouldn't say security is neither making it cheaper or faster typically. You know, it's usually some overhead of some form and some extra cost. National security, same reason, I crossed that off. And avoid litigation, right? So these are just examples of incentives that people may have, the different stakeholders. So really comes down to, can I make more money? Do I need compliance? Or do I need to avoid lawsuits? That's pretty much where it's at, right? Let me just talk about the big disconnect here. So asset buyers and owners would choose more security devices over less secure ones, hopefully, but how do you do that? I give you two routers from two different vendors, ask you, which one's more secure? How do you know? Do you even care? I'm gonna buy the cheaper one, or I'm gonna buy the big brand because nobody got fired ever for buying something, you know? So That's a tough case to make, which leaves the manufacturer in a pickle because you should invest in better device security as a selling point. But how is that selling point if the buyer is not making it a buying point and you got intransparency? So we need to make better OT ICS device security somehow more transparent, right? We don't have that so much. So this is really a presentation, call it a fairy tale of expectations, incentives, and intransparency and transparency here today. That's what I'm talking about as at the crux of this presentation. So let's talk quickly about the R&D itself that was done. So it was carried out, like I mentioned, under the Small Business Innovation Research Program. That's a government R&D funding program that you put a proposal in, and then if you're lucky, you get funded, and you got a couple of months to figure some stuff out. It's for highly innovative things, so they throw new RFPs for new ideas kind of at you. So we proposed, and bear with me here too, there's unfortunately a red herring there, improve OT ICS cybersecurity systemically by reducing technical barriers. Mind you, technical barriers, right? So we figured, okay, it's gotta be that if all the stakeholders were able to get all the vulnerability information and all the reporting, everything's optimized, and I'm doing a scan of the thing, and I'm getting that reported to the vendor, and the vendor fixes it, and then sends it to CISA, and NIST has it in the database, and this and that. That's our thinking that we had. So a tool to integrate vulnerability management across OT ICS stakeholders, right? That was the idea. Makes sense, right? Obviously makes sense. Well, oh, and there's a link to the project website. Well, it really didn't so much. We found out, we learned the hard way, the best way to start a project is to first validate your assumptions. I recommend that to everyone. Build it and they'll come, or building something and then later realizing that it had assumptions that didn't really reflect reality is a bad move. So we did that. We piggybacked on the market analysis for our binary vulnerability analysis product. It's called BinLens, and we talked to like overall hundreds of people in the last year, 100 plus OT people, different kinds of job titles, to really get the lay of the land of this and other things that we needed to know about our product and positioning, etc. So product security on the manufacturer side, DevSecOps, manufacturer side, CISOs, asset owners on the buyer side, and then red teams. There's a lot of more job titles, but we were basically figuring, well, we need to talk to people about this, see what they think, and then we build, versus building something first and then realizing that it didn't make sense. So there you have it. Nope, it says there, because what we proposed there was a challenge. You take your data and you make it happen that it ends up in the NVD and everything else. That was a challenge, but it wasn't the blocker. The blocker was really incentives. I just want to let that sink in. It's the why. We talk about what we're going to do, and I'd love to talk to you all day, if you want, about our product and what it does. That's the what. The question is why, right? So what did we come up with? We came up with an OT ICS cybersecurity scoring mechanism. Mind you, it fits to kind of the whole idea of how NIST operates the NVD and is responsible for a bunch of general guidance in OT and IT. So it seemed to fit into their world into their sphere of influence quite well. It's a public scoring website that we developed. So you can go there right now if you want, nct.objectsecurity.io. It's a proof of concept. So I want to kind of really make that clear. These projects are small budgets in the first phase that are supposed to prove the viability of something. So how do you create trust in such a service? I think that's immediately the question that we had. We're from a small company. We're cool. Object security is cool for sure, but why would we be the guys that everyone wants to like listen to when it comes to scoring? Like, you got a bad score, you got a good score. Why, right? So how do you create trust in this? We figured, well, the only way to create trust is essentially open source the whole methodology. So the calculation and the methodology, that needs to be public for people to believe in this and have a transparency. Also public data sources, if we base it right now in this first phase on public data sources, nobody can complain either that it's sort of like your credit score and somehow it goes down, you don't know what you did, and some random guy stole your social and got a loan and didn't pay back, and you have no idea, nobody tells you anything, right? You don't want that. You don't get buy-in. This is very hard to get buy-in unless we really make it right. So full transparency is critical. There's the whole explanation in this link there. And it's clearly a journey. So we're trying to enable dialogue between the stakeholders to get somewhere, highlight positive scores, and enable improvement. So that last bullet, we talked to the people that run the NVD at NIST, and that's one thing they said that they think is a good way of essentially making this a glass half full thing. So very briefly here, I run through a couple of things that we did in the research to just figure out what's in this data. And I just want to say, so the NVD analysis that we did, it yields clues. However, be aware that obviously the NVD lags behind. There's a time between today and publication date of a CVE. That's the time when you have unpublished vulnerabilities. There are many tools like our BinLens product and others that will scan your actual the binaries, firmware, whatever it is, your software, and find those unpublished things, right? Now, once it's published, the NVD is a good place to look at. So we looked first at the number of CVEs, disclosures per year. I want to kind of say that that's not the y-axis isn't the same for all of those. Siemens had a lot more CVE releases overall than, like, say, Texas Instruments. Interesting, you see like a dip there in 2021 or so, but it's been growing massively otherwise. Why is that? Well, we can only speculate, but the challenge with the number of CVEs and whether that even matters in a score is because there are macro events. This is kind of a funny one. Without any talking about the politics and who wrote this and whatever, there has been a massive dip in 2021 of China not reporting CVEs into the NVD anymore. That graph at the bottom, that's not really where vulnerabilities are. There's no way that you guys, all the vendors, got so great all of a sudden on 1 month in 2021. It just means somebody maybe is just hoarding exploits, right? And I can't really comment on this. I don't have a national security, this and that, whatever. But it coincides with the dip, the reporting dips too there, right? So not ideal, but let's look at some other metrics. Average vulnerability discovery date versus published, CVE published date, right? So that basically means how long did it take for somebody to find something, disclose it somewhere, maybe a bug bounty program or something, hopefully patches out, and then publishing. These things lag massively at times. So we found about 50%, so that's the graph on the right, about 50% of CVEs have earliest reference of some vendor-provided thing where it was kind of announced, the vulnerability. And there's usually, obviously, a positive time of days or weeks or months or years. That's the delay. Now, we found also negative ones. That's funny. That's like towards this side of the left side graph. That means, oh, what? It was discovered after it was published? No, it wasn't. It was just updated, right? That's what we checked a couple of things. So this is also a pretty challenging metric to use for scoring. Third one, published date versus remediation date. So that's kind of, here's your patch, right? Yeah, massive differences too in the different manufacturers over time. And also important when you're looking at the red part here, the red kind of pie charts, only very few CVEs actually have a reference tagged about a patch. It's kind of in the 5% range. So that's a data quality issue that's significant. So then percentage of CVEs with proof of exploitation. The CAF database is the one proof, or the exploit, there's a reference in the CVE to an exploit write-up or something, right? So with that, we found about a quarter are either in the CAF or have such, have a proof of exploitation, basically, right? So it's kind of interesting. So with this data, and there's some more analysis, I just don't have so much time today. We figured, okay, let's build something. Let's just, hit the ground running, see what happens. So we built a NVD and CAF scraper and analysis tool, sort of a feature underneath this prototype website. And we decided on 4 subscores that a manufacturer can get or get scored on. First is exploitability, right? So that's, is it in the CAF, things like that. Remediability, is there a patch reference in the data? Severity is CVSS of the CVE. Explainability, we used an algorithm to look for the readability of the overall write-up in the CVE. Because a lot of, especially older CVEs, are written in such a way that it's incomprehensible. It misses a load of information it's not very actionable, right? And I do have a note thing here. The algorithm was called Flesch-Kincaid reading test. And I hope I pronounced that right. So we used basically a readability test. So those 4 things, there's a bit more that flows in. I'm just oversimplifying this, but there was a weighting. So the whole thing calculates a weighted average. And all of the weightings per se are open for discussion. All of this is open for discussion, except the same algorithm gets applied across the entire NVD and across all the manufacturers. So there's no like, hey, I'm the guy that sponsors the website and now I'm looking better or something like that, right? Gives you this kind of look and feel on the website, the overall score and then the subscores, that there's also explanatory stuff. What we found is, I should maybe say, so we don't rank against each other. So the scale is an absolute weighted average from 1 to 10 on each kind of. So the maximum score that right now somebody can get, that somebody has, not can get, that somebody has in the NVD is 80. Now, if you do everything perfect, you'll be at 100. But it's practically impossible to get there unless you launch a fresh product now and do everything perfectly, right? Brings me to an interesting kind of analysis here. So I'm presenting 3 examples, and Dale made me do it. I didn't want to put examples in, but blame him if you don't like it. So Siemens, first one. So this is what the page looks like. And again, proof of concept, but you see 72 score over the entire history of the NVD, which, by the way, is pretty good when 80 is the max, right? Very good on exploitability and remediability. It's 100% means great. Doesn't mean 100% exploit, it means you're doing great, just FYI. Then it goes kind of downhill. So I marked, on the red thing, this is the slider that we have for the time window. Becomes kind of interesting. Oh, and this is the math. If you don't know weighted average, ask your kid or ask ChatGPT, don't ask me. But that's the math. Anyway, so you do the slider here to reduce the time. I don't know what I exactly picked, but it's just multiple. You see how that gets smaller and smaller. And you see at the same time the score going up. So what that tells you is, well, they're doing better over time. So trajectory matters and legacy devices matter. If you're Siemens, your footprint with legacy and end-of-life devices and old stuff is like, that's bread and butter, right? And your overall deployment. So it does matter where you're at today, and it matters, are you improving, right? So there's clearly a sign of improvement, big improvement. And then as far as attack surface is concerned, ubiquity also matters. If you're some niche vendor, you're not getting as attacked potentially as Siemens PLC or something, right? And this is not about Siemens specifically, it's just an example. Example 2, similar, but Rockwell Automation. Take the entire history of the NVD, I think it started at what, like 96 or something. You get those kind of scores. Mainly bad, as you can see here right now, is the remediability, because that means, okay, they didn't really link patches, for example, into the NVD's CVE listings or something like that, right? So you can kind of drill down why that is. And here you can see what happens with them as you make the window closer to present day. They're actually pretty good. All of a sudden, they're all in the green too, right? So there's been a rapid improvement over the years. So that's an interesting kind of finding there. I wanted to bring up a third example, IT, for comparison. So we talked about like mostly OT, I guess. I mean, Siemens and Rockwell Automation, they do many things, but let's take a pure IT play. So Mattermost is like a chat system, self-hosted chat system that, for example, my company uses. They're pretty much like high on the list, very high on it. They're like one of the top, right? So with them also, so this is kind of a chat thing here, but doesn't matter where you pull the slider, it's always 79, right? Now, why is that? Well, they run like a normal tech stack on IT, like normal computers, mobile. It's a relatively young product, you know, Linux, Windows, mobile app, written in Go. It's the programming language, Postgres, MySQL, React, etc. So that's all stuff that, you know, the IT people, enterprise IT people are used to a frequent update cycle. Everything is relatively up to date. If your computer is older than 3 years, then it's like old. You know, if your PLC is older than 30 years, it's old. So there's this as comparison, and it's going to be relatively challenging for an established OT manufacturer that's been around for a long time to look on the overall average really good, because, you know, it's not been good 15 years ago, compared cybersecurity-wise, compared to what's expected today. So it's interesting. So with that, what do people get from this? So buyers obviously get something that is letting them choose the more secure product over the less secure product. It's not like a Yelp review, you know, where everyone just rates everyone else, kind of, and, you know, you buy sushi from the gas station, you get like a 1 star, you know, that kind of stuff. That's not what this is, but it's definitely useful for the buyers. Now, here's the kicker. It's also useful for the manufacturers, because if the manufacturers cannot really invest in doing extra well on security because the buyers don't differentiate, then you got no incentive. So with something like this, you do in fact have either a positioning or a call it a money-making aspect to your product that sets you apart if you're doing well, right? So there's incentive there for the manufacturers now, because, you know, maybe my product's doing better than yours or yours, and then people come to me. The same way you buy on Amazon, or any of those, I mean, most people look at the ratings and not at the actual description nowadays, right? So this is not just here, you know, one-sided. So explore the proof of concept site. Pretty simple to use. If you've got ideas, please talk to us. We're trying to kind of get the community involved. I think this has to be understood as a prototype, right? So I mean, we have proposed to NIST a raft of things that should be also fed into this calculation that we'll explore in future project phases. If you're critical and say this is a terrible idea, well, talk to us too, and we'll together make it better, and tell your peers about it. And I just want to say also in closing that this data that we used obviously has this time lag that the NVD has, right? So for unpublished, which people should not forget, that there's a time window in OT between, like, I don't know, 1 year and 5 years before stuff ends up in the NVD, you should be using a scanner tool, especially the manufacturers. You should be testing these things with binary analysis, source code analysis, all of these things, right? And on the buyer side too. So this isn't going to be a panacea on public information like the NVD because of that initial time window. And that's it. I'll open it for Q&A. And I got somebody here. Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, you just mentioned that time lag that you expect to see. when you're looking at the website, does that practically mean that if you bring the left scaler all the way over to the right, that everything is going to look very high scoring because there aren't any vulnerabilities that have made it through that lag period? Do you have to cap the right-hand side to be like something, 2020 or something, to give enough time for vulnerabilities to have been identified to feed into your algorithm?
Yeah, so the number of vulnerabilities as such isn't a factor that is easy to say it's a good or bad thing, right? Because you find a lot, you disclose a lot, you're doing extra good hygiene as a result. That shouldn't be held against you versus being some intransparent, obscure vendor that never discloses anything and then looks really good. That's not how we score it. But yeah, it's based on less and less data if you're going very far to the left. That is for sure. So yes.
Outside of the vulnerability information, what data are you using?
So in this, what's live right now on the site, it's only NVD and KEF. We use things like our own product also that scans the actual firmware if it's like something available. We run on-prem at a customer if they don't want it published. But if we just want to look at published stuff, we run public firmware through our product to see what's there. It identifies unpublished vulnerabilities using symbolic execution. So that's one thing we're doing, but that's not feeding in because we're a little concerned if we're making this about our stuff specifically, then people go like, hey, this is like some vendor push. I think where I see this go maybe is an extra tab in the NVD in future, or something like that. So it's not going to be a product or a solution that you would deploy in your organization, but it would be an extra piece of information. But yeah, there's the time lag's a big deal. That's the biggest deal with the NVD. The biggest deal with people looking at a software bill of materials and looking up on the NVD what's going on, they're missing the most critical time window, which is the 0-day time window and anything in OT that's like 1, 2, 3 years out. I can't stress that enough. That's the biggest risk piece of it. Please.
So how does this fit into the Cyber Resilience Act? Are you going to be competing with that?
Sorry, I can't hear.
So how does this fit into the Cyber Resilience Act? Are you going to be competing with that act, or is it going to be complementing it?
Yeah, we're not competing with, we would tie into things, so it's not competing. And I think where this closest fits is like US Cyber Trust Mark, that kind of stuff. So no, it's not meant to compete. It's meant to be kind of enriched information in the NVD. Or alongside the NVD. Yeah, it definitely doesn't, we're not trying to replace anything like the Resiliency Act. Yeah.
Hey there. So you mentioned wanting to add a few more things to the analysis. I can think of like, default configs, platform hardening of the PLC itself, plain text protocols being turned on or not out of the box, big risk factors in OT that aren't captured in the NVD. Can you talk about anything that you would like to add, any challenges you see with augmenting it with some of that other, platform security and config approach?
Yeah, thanks for asking this. So I think because we're kind of in a multi-stage process with NIST here on this project, we're not really able to disclose where we're seeing the roadmap go for this thing. But as far as other data sources, the main concern that we would have is it some vendor's products output? And then the question, we would like ours to be part of this, but it has to be done in such a way that these vendor products that, for example, scan things, you provide an output from our product, or I don't know what you do, your product or somebody's product. The question is, how is that then ranked? And the only way to do this in a trustworthy way is to do it out in the open. There's got to be a kind of a consortium, or it's going to be operated by NIST, or it's got to be some kind of stakeholder decision on how, of all the stuff that you mentioned, how is that rated? How much positive or negative is that giving you, right? So that's the challenge, I would say, versus each individual item. I hope that answers the question a little bit. Yeah, cool.
I was wondering, in your subscores, is there a possibility, you think, or did you look at whether you're counting stuff kind of twice? Like, say, you have an exploitability score based on the KEV, in your impact score, you're using CVSS, which might also count, known exploit as part of that score, and then you'd have something appearing in two of the subscores. Did you look at that at all, like that they're truly independent of each other, or does it matter?
Yeah, we looked at it, and it doesn't really matter at least at the fidelity that we're operating.
Right.
Because in the end, what's open to discussion is the weighting, because you're talking kind of, if I'm double counting something, am I weighing it higher than I'm thinking? The weights are 3, 3, 2, and 1, because we figured that seems about right intuitively, but there's not a science behind how we pick the weightings in the first place. So I think these things we are aware of. There's many more of those kind of challenges, like especially what happens if you don't have a patch reference? What happens if all the people that don't have something listed, how you rank them, good or bad? And there are many challenges. So I think it's more, you look at the overall ranking of the scoring, see if it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, then we would fix the calculation, but it will be applied again across the board to be fair and transparent, right? But thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you.
It's a great question. All right. Is that it? All right. Thank you very much.